Alright, good morning everybody. It's your boy Akeem and welcome to today's vlogs. For today, I'm going to give you all of my grades for each team of the AFC division for their picks of the 2015 NFL Draft. For this vlog, I'm here to talk about the AFC East division. Starting with the Buffalo Bills, they had many head-scratching picks with their selections. That's just my personal opinion. Now, they didn't have any picks in the first round. Their first pick came in the second round with Ronald Darby, the cornerback, coming out of Florida State. Now they have a pretty decent cornerback tandem with Corey Graham, who actually had 84 tackles, leading all of the cornerbacks, as well as Stephen Gilmore and Lorodius McKelvin, who actually led the team in interceptions. I think this was a great addition, one of the good picks for the Buffalo Bills to even add more depth at cornerback to actually work along with Aaron Williams at safety. Now in the third round, this is their next good pick, John Miller, or the offensive guard out of Louisville. I think this was a good pick to help address things in the offensive line. Now for the remaining picks, I was a little bit shocked with the picks that they did have. Starting with the fifth round, they picked up Carlos Williams, the running back out of Florida State. Now he definitely has good size, good speed, to get good running capability, but I think this was a wasted pick because they still have Fred Jackson, who has at least a year or two left in him, and they did signed LaShawn McCoy from the Philadelphia Eagles. In the sixth round, they went with an outside linebacker, a position that they did need, and they went with Tony Stewart, the linebacker coming out of Clemson. Now, he had a disappointing career as a Clemson Tiger, and he still had a decent season with 58 tackles and 10 tackles for loss as a senior, was still disappointing. In the sixth round, despite the fact that they did sign tight end Charles Clay, they still went with the Mackey Award winner and Nick O'Leary coming out of Florida State, 6'2", 252 pounds, good size, and I think he can become a good backup to Charles Clay, who's a good versatile tight end between the two. And in the seventh round, that's when they went with a wide receiver who I think they should have went with the wide receiver in the earlier rounds, and Dez Lewis, the receiver coming out of Central Arkansas. Now he does have decent size at 6'2", 218 pounds, but I think they could have went with a better wide receiver in the earlier rounds, and also they should have addressed and tried to pick up a quarterback in this year's draft, but perhaps the Bills and Rex Ryan decided not to go quarterback because they didn't really have too much faith other than the outside two quarterbacks with Marcus Mariota and Jameis Winston. I still think they should have went with the quarterback in the related rounds like Brett Hundley, who was actually picked in the fifth round by the Green Bay Packers. Now overall, I don't really know what kind of direction that they was going with their selections. I'm gonna have to give them a C for their picks, but hey, I could be proven wrong. Next team, the New York Jets, and they had an amazing draft, starting with their first pick and a good one, and Leonard Williams, the defensive end out of USC. Now, at first, like everybody else, everybody was confused with this selection, but I think this was a great value pick. And even though they still had Muhammad Wilkerson, they also had Sheldon Richardson and the defensive line, Calvin Pace and Quentin Coples. I think this is another great addition I think this defense is probably, defensive line could be the best young defensive line in the National Football League. In the second round, that's when they went with a wide receiver in which a lot of people was hoping that the Jets would go for, and they picked up a good one out of Ohio State and Devin Smith. And Smith can work along with Eric Decker, and the Jets signed Brandon Marshall from the Chicago Bears. In the third round, they went with an outside linebacker, another position that they were aiming for, and they picked up a pretty good one out of Louisville and Lorenzo Malden. I think this is a great addition. In the fourth round, they went with quarterback Bryce Petty out of Baylor. I think this was an amazing pick in the fourth round, and this is going to be a huge race in New York between Petty, Ryan Fitzpatrick, and Geno Smith. In the fifth round, they picked up a good offensive guard out of Texas A&M and Jarvis Harrison. I think this was a great pick in this particular round. And with their final pick in the seventh round, not a big fan of this one, and Deion Simon, the defensive tackle out of Northwestern State. And I do understand why. He's 6'4", 321 pounds. I think this was a pretty good pick, but I'm not a huge fan yet, but we will see. Now, overall for their selections, even with a big pick in Leonard Williams in the sixth overall selection, I have to give the Jets an A. I think they had a solid, great draft. Next team, my second favorite team, the New England Patriots. A couple of positions where they needed to address was at guard, wide receiver, defensive tackle, defensive back, and defensive end. With their first pick, they went with Malcolm Brown, one of my Texas Longhorns, at defensive tackle. That's a big check mark. And the next round, they went with a good player in the secondary, and Jordan Richards out of Stanford. Third round, they went with defensive end Gino Grissom out of Oklahoma. Now, he's an okay player. He had an okay career, but I do like his size. But in the fourth round, I think they picked up a better defensive end, Trey Flowers out of Arkansas. He definitely had a good career, 47.5 tackles for loss, and also to go along with 18 sacks. In the fourth round, sticking 2 more picks, they addressed the offensive line with guard from Florida State, Trey Jackson. I think this was a great pick in the fourth round, as well as Shaq Mason, the center out of Georgia Tech. I think he's a great center. I think this was a good pick as well. In the fifth round, they had a lot of picks in this year's draft. They went with Joe Cordero, the long snapper coming out of Navy. That was an interesting choice. In the sixth round, they had 2 picks. First, Matt Williams, the outside linebacker coming out of Mississippi State. He had an okay career. I didn't really agree with this one. 165 total tackles in his career to go along with 22 tackles for loss and just 6 sacks. Not big numbers in that particular department as far as getting behind the line of scrimmage. And their next pick, they went with A.J. Derby out of the Arkansas, the tight end, 6'3", 255 pounds. I think he's a decent blocking tight end who will be used a little bit in that passing game. He did have 300 yards this past season. And with the 7th round selections, I think they had some great 7th round picks. Darryl Roberts out of Marshall, he had 17 pass breakups this past season to go along with 2 interceptions. I think this was a good sleeper in the 7th round, as well as with their final pick, and Xavier Dixon out of Alabama, 12.5 tackles for loss to go along with 9 sacks. Some great numbers. Now, overall for the Patriots, I'm going to have to give them a solid B. They went with a lot of non-big name players, but I still think they picked up a couple of great players to fit well in that 53-man roster. So I'm going to have to give them a B for their efforts. Finally, the Miami Dolphins. Now, I believe they had one of the best drafts in this past season, actually one of my top 5 draft classes this year. So we will see. Anything can happen. Now, areas where they should have addressed, it was at wide receiver, guard, defensive tackle, cornerback, and running back, and they did fulfill each of those positions with some great players. Start with their first pick at wide receiver, Devontae Parker out of Louisville. Now, I thought that this Louisville wide receiver would go 10th overall to the St. Louis Rams, but I think this was a great pickup for the Miami Dolphins. In the second round, they would address the defensive tackle position with Jordan Phillips out of OU. Now, this guy is a behemoth at 6'5", 329 pounds. In the fourth round, they addressed the guard position with a great one out of Arizona State and Jamil Douglas. Fifth round, this could be a sleeper at cornerback, Bobby McCann out of Memphis. He actually can create a couple of playmaking plays. In the secondary, he had 11 interceptions over the course of the last 2 seasons. Sticking with the 5th round, they had another pick in the 5th round, and that's when they addressed the running back position with JG out of Boise State. Now, even though Lamar Miller should be leading the way at running back, I think this was a great pickup out of Boise State to back up Lamar Miller, and he could possibly start over Lamar Miller, talking about JG. In the 5th round, they had 2 more other picks with Cedric Thompson, the safety out of Minnesota, 162 tackles over the course of the last 2 seasons, and Tony Lippett, their final pick, the wide receiver coming out of Michigan State. This was a great pick as well. He's 6'2", 192 pounds. Now, yes, he is a little bit slender, but he did have over 1,100 yards this past season and 11 touchdown receptions this past year. Great numbers, and I think these all were great selections for the Miami Dolphins. And they too, along with the New York Jets, I'm going to have to give them an A, actually an A+ for their picks. I think they did an excellent job this past year in this NFL draft. Now, the next time to catch you guys will be in just a couple of minutes. I'm going to give you a blog of the AFC West Division. Thank you for watching this blog. I'm your man, Keenan McCall. Be easy.